Okay, everyone, good evening. Welcome to the Grafton Select Board meeting for October 27th, 2020, 7:06 p.m. Just as a preliminary matter, my name is Peter Carlson. I'm chair of the Grafton Select Board. Please permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. If members of the Select Board, when I read your name, please answer in the affirmative. Ms. DeFazio?
DeFazio, present.
Mr. Prisby?
Present.
Ms. Roy?
Roy here.
Mr. Often? Oh, he's not here yet. All right, please, staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. When I call your name, please. Temporary Town Administrator, Mr. Terenzini?
Here.
Ms. Oliver?
Here.
Chief Crapo?
Here.
Mr. Berger?
Here.
Mr. Canoia?
Right here.
Ms. Anderson? Not here yet. Okay, great. So good evening, everyone. This open meeting of the Town of Grafton Select Board is being conducted remotely consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the stern state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend all public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible location, physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted to the town's website at www.grafton-ma.gov, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment at the beginning of the meeting. For this meeting, the Select Board is convening via Zoom meeting as posted at the town website identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating via video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and that take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording and viewed by the public. All supporting materials have been provided to members of this body are available at the town's website when final minutes are posted. Unless otherwise noted, the public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I, the chair, note otherwise. Just to cover some ground rules, we are turning to before we turn to the first item of the agenda, please permit me to cover some effective and clear rules for us to conduct our business. I, chair, will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each to provide any comment, questions, and/or motions. Please hold your name until you're called. Further, please remember to mute your computer when you're not speaking, and please remember to speak clearly in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to encourage with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. Finally, when each vote is taken, it will be conducted by a roll call vote. After members have spoken, chair will afford public comment as follows. I will first read any public comments or questions received in advance of the meeting, followed by a real-time board and/or applicant response. Public comments during the meeting will be conducted through written statements that were submitted to the board prior to this meeting. At this point in time, I've covered everything I needed to do there. Let me pull up my first agenda item. So first up, I have a few announcements that I need to read. Just a reminder, a COVID update, that as of October 27th, there have been 144 cases of COVID in Grafton. This is an increase of 4 as of today. We ask that residents please continue to wear your mask and practice social distancing. As a reminder, town meeting will be held this Saturday at 2 p.m. at the high school football field. For those attending, must wear a mask and practice social distancing. There is no indoor seating, so please dress for the weather. we will be using the consent agenda, which allows for the grouping of motions into one consent motion. Just a reminder that November 3rd election is upon us, that this is the last week for any early in-person voting and is taking place in the Municipal Center Gym at 30 Providence Road, Grafton, Mass. From 9 to 4 every day, Monday through Friday. Polls will be open for in-person voting on Election Day on November 3rd from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Just a reminder, the Select Board will continue to hold public comment section as part of the regular business meetings. However, it will no longer, be written after today. If someone wishes to speak to an issue that's not on the agenda, they should raise their hand during the public comment section at the beginning of this meeting, and they will be brought into the meeting as a panelist to address the board. Once the comment is complete, they will be returned to participant status in the webinar. Please note that for any correspondence to the board, there will be a deadline of noon Friday for correspondence to be included in the Select Board meeting packets. Any correspondence received after that will be included with the next business meeting. Summaries of correspondence will no longer be read. If board members wish to address specific items of correspondence, they may do so during that time. And just a reminder, please, DPW facility update. The highway divisions of the DPW has started the long-awaited process of moving into the new facility at 64 Old Westboro Road. Residents should be aware that the administrative office, which was at the town hall, is also relocating to the new facility. The facility will be staffed from 7:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m., but the administrative staff offices remains closed to the public. The DPW wishes to thank the residents for their support in the funding of this new facility. And we want to thank the DPW facility for moving in a short amount of time into the new facility. We wish them all the best. Okay, that's it for announcements. Do we have anybody from the public comment at this time? Okay, not seeing any. Let's go into the first part here. We have a public hearing for fiscal year 2021 tax classification. So at this point, I would ask that the clerk read the public hearing notice contained in the packet.
The Grafton Select Board will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, October 27th, 2020 at 7 p.m. on the question of the adoption of the percentages of the local tax levy to be borne by each class of real property and personal property for the next fiscal year in accordance with Chapter 70, Section 56 of the general laws. The meeting will be held via Zoom. At such hearing, the Board of Assessors will provide all the information and data relevant to making such determination and the fiscal effect of the available alternatives. The Commissioner of Revenue will not approve the tax rate of the town until the Select Board has held such a public hearing and until the town has adopted the percentages of the local tax levy to be borne by each class of real and personal property. The Zoom link will be posted on the October 27th, 2020 agenda. If you have questions to ask or comments to offer but cannot participate in the public hearing, you may submit the same by emailing bosgroup@graftons-ma.gov, by written letter sent via United States Postal Service, or by hand delivery. Drop off at the Gold Box outside the Municipal Center, 30 Providence Road, Grafton, Mass. All must be received by 2 p.m. October 23rd, 2020, Grafton Select Board.
Thank you, Ms. Roy. Can you read the motion to open the board for the public hearing?
I move that the board vote to open the fiscal year 2021 tax classification public hearing.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to open the public hearing? Seeing none. All those by roll call vote, please. Ms. DeFazio.
DeFazio, aye.
Ms. Roy.
Roy, aye.
Mr. Prisby.
Yeah.
Mr. Often.
Often aye.
Okay. Peter Carlson, I declare the motion carried. Open to public hearing. This evening we have Ms. Oliver here from the Town Assessor's Office. Mary, would you like to walk us through your presentation with this public hearing this evening?
I would. Thank you so much for taking the time for this hearing. And I did submit the PowerPoint presentation. Do you have that available to share?
I do. Stand by.
Thank you so much.
Just have to re-download it. Hold on.
Yes.
What's going on here? Okay. Can everyone see that?
Yes. Oops. Okay, so the purpose of the classification hearing in guidelines with Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 56, allows a shift in the tax burden between property classes. The classification hearing consists of 4 votes to be taken by the Select Board. First vote is a residential factor. We have open space discount. Third is a residential exemption. And then fourth would be a small commercial exemption. Next slide. These 4 votes, the first is the residential factor. This shifts the tax burden between residential and commercial properties. Open space discount will shift the tax burden to residential from open space, which presently the town of Grafton does not have any classified open space. Residential exemption, this will shift your tax burden within the residential class. And a small commercial exemption will shift the burden within the commercial and industrial classes to give discounts to qualifying commercial properties only. The burden will shift to the industrial also, but they are not allowed the discount. First, I start off with establishing, how does the town establish the tax rates? This is just to show you from fiscal 11 all the way to 21, every year the tax rates and how they've affected every year. Okay, in order to set the tax rate, we take the total tax levy and we divide it by the total assessed value of the town. And the levy is actually the town's budget. For the tax levy, it's the total taxes to be collected on the real estate and personal property. These amount is determined by the town meeting in May and October. Okay. This is where our Proposition 2.5 comes in. So we have to set our tax levy. We have to take our prior year's levy limit, which was $39,346,671. We can add any amended fiscal 20 growth in, which I picked up 4,383 of amended growth for fiscal year 20. You add those 2 together and you can take the 2.5% for an increase, which comes out to 983,776. Then from there, you add in your new growth for fiscal 21, 913,245. You also have to add in the override, which was voted in at the June town meeting. So your levy limit right now is $45,248,075. Okay. Now you take your levy limit. Now you have to include your debt exclusions, which is $3,908,422. Our road stabilization override is just $1.5 million. So the max levy limit for the town this year is $50,656,497. Okay, from that actual maximum levy that we can levy this year, the actual tax levy that was required is $47,766,025, leaving us an excess levy limit of $2,890,472. And this next slide is just shows you the historical tax levies over the years from 2015 to 21. If you notice, the purple at the top is the override amount, and the light blue on the very top is your excess levy. Next slide. This is the new growth by class for this year. We got $913,245 in new growth. Residential, new single-family homes, additions, in-law apartments, and things like that made up 51.34% of the new growth. Commercial and industrial was 23.26%, and our personal property was 25.26%. We were almost at very close to a 50-50 split. It was 51.48%. Oh, we can go to the next slide. That was perfect. So for this year, at the bottom there, 2021, in our growth, this is one of the highest we've gotten. We had 51.48% in residential, but we had 48.52% in commercial growth. Compared to back in 2010, we had 45% in commercial growth, so which is good to get this growth. Okay. So now that we have our levy limit, which is the total budget that we have to raise, we're going to divide that by our total assessed value of the town. The value on the town is based on our 2019 sales. Go to the next slide. The overall assessed value for the town this year is $2,815,698,973. This is an increase of 3.37% from fiscal year 20. Slide here, it shows you the comparison of our historical assessments from 2014 to 2021. And actually this is the highest we've hit for our overall assessed value at $2.8 billion. This slide here is just showing you our residential assessed values from 16 to 21, and the steady increase every year in each category from our single families, our condos, our 2 families, 3 families, and our apartments. This is our assessed values from 16 to 21 for our commercial, industrial, and our personal property. And if you see this on the industrial and the personal property, those were our biggest growth factors this year for our growth and also our values. So when our assessed values for the average single family home for fiscal 21, our average value is $424,598, which is an increase of 1.22% from fiscal 20. Last year was about $419,000 for the average single family. Okay. This slide's a little bit out of order, but this is a great representation, just showing you that the value of the homes are increasing, but the tax rate isn't spiking as fast as the values of the homes going up. Okay, for our tax rate, we're going to take our total levy, which is $47,766,025, and we're going to divide that by the total assessed value of the town, the $2.815 billion, which will give us a tax rate of $16.96 per thousand. If we take that $16.96, we multiply it by the average single family tax bill, the tax bill is going to be $7,201, which is an increase of $281 or 4.08% from last year's tax bills. Back to the purpose of the classification hearing is Chapter 40, Section 56. It allows the shift in the tax burden between the property classes. The classification, once again, consists of the 4 votes. It will be a residential factor, open space discount, residential exemption, and a small commercial exemption. Okay, now, vote 1 is your residential factor. This will shift the tax rate between the residential and the commercial. We also know it as splitting the tax rate. This slide here, you can see the first line is if we do not split, if the factor is 1, which means there's no split, we have a residential tax rate of $16.96, and the change in the tax bill is an increase of $281, where for the commercial properties, it's an increase of $397. If we go to the bottom, this will break it down, at 10% increments. If we go to 1.5 on a split, it shows you that the residential tax rate comes down to $16.21, but your commercial tax rate will go up to $24.08. It will be a savings of approximately $37 on the average tax bill, but it will be an increase to the commercial properties of $5,000, which is almost 50% increase in their tax bills. This is the graph just showing that if you were to split those tax rates, what it actually does for the single family brings it down a little bit, but the increase for the commercial is significantly higher. Like I said, it's approximately 50% increase in the commercial tax bill. The town of Grafton, right now, we're at a like 91-9 split. So 91% is residential and about a little over 9% is commercial property. The next vote that will have to be taken is on open space discount. Open space discount allows up to a 25% discount. It increases your residential tax rate because we're going to shift that burden from from open space to the residential properties. Presently in the town of Grafton, we have no classified open space. The third vote that needs to be taken is the residential exemption. The residential exemption gives up to 20% discount to owner-occupied residential properties. This is an impact to the overall residential class and shifts the burden of tax from the less expensive properties, and it puts it onto the higher price properties and non-residential homes. The benefits of this is to communities with a high number of vacation homes or non-owner occupied properties. This is showing you on a residential split. Residential exemption, there's approximately 6,700 residential parcels in town. A 20% exemption would be about $84,920 worth of value discounted. Approximately 6,000 would qualify. It would make your residential tax rate $21.18 per thousand. The lower properties, which was around $200,000 in value, it would save about $573. Your average single family tax bill at $424,000 would increase another $270.70. And for your higher value single family properties, the value of about $600,000 would increase another $1,114. The fourth vote we take is for a small commercial exemption. A small commercial exemption is up to 10% of the value discount. In order to qualify for this exemption, the property has to be assessed for less than $1 million. There has to be less than 10 full-time employees in each business in that property. Each individual parcel would need to be reviewed for qualification before we can set this tax rate. The increase to commercial industrial rate, and it shifts the tax burden onto the commercial and all of the industrial. Once again, any industrial properties do not qualify for this commercial exemption. Historically, in the town of Grafton, on the 4 votes for the residential factor, it was a 1, which means no split in the tax rate. Open space discount, no. Residential exemption, no. And a small commercial exemption, no. And next page would be the motions required after reviewing this classification. And is there any questions?
Thank you, Mary. Mr. Prisby?
Thank you, Mary. Great presentation as ever. I'm wondering about the impact on the industrial and residential burden if we were to, in light of COVID, enact a small commercial exemption.
Okay, first of all, the small commercial exemption would not affect the residential whatsoever. That tax burden is going to be split only between your commercial, your industrial, and your personal property.
Okay.
So that burden will go up. Any discount we give to the commercial properties, the smaller commercial properties, would be put onto your industrial and your personal properties taxes.
Obviously, with the 91-9 split, we're in a position of having to be sort of happy with whatever commercial and industrial business that we have. And I'm noting that a large portion of our new growth money was coming from industrial this year. And before I get to that part, every year there's sort of a balancing act about where we burden people. And this year is a little bit different. And I'm wondering, we've typically passed over the small commercial exemption historically. But I think given our challenges, I wonder if we could get away with doing it this year without burdening too much the industrial sector and hurting us that way over the course of the year. I mean, if we did this for a year and came back and revisited it next year, how much pain are we talking about for the industrial sector?
I would have to get qualifying numbers for who would be available, who would qualify for this. So I'd have to go to every business in town. And what happens is like, for instance, your strip malls, okay? If you were to give this exemption, it goes to the property owner. It does not go to the small business. And basically it's considered kind of like the trickle down effect. So that you give it to the property owner and hopefully they turn around and they pass it on to their tenants. One of those, that's how that would work. But in a lot of these strip malls, where a lot of our smaller businesses also are, the property itself is not going to qualify because the value of that property has to be less than $1 million. I can tell you right now, for instance, our personal property taxes, we have $2,000 exemption. So that does help with your small business. I know a lot of towns only have a $500 exemption. So if you have more than $500, they're going to tax you on it. We go to 2,000. So that's kind of a help to the small business also. And a lot of these businesses, like I said, they do have to have less than 10 employees, which most of your small businesses do. But if they're in these strip malls, they're not going to be able to be credited that exemption.
Thank you. Mr. Terenzini?
No, Mary touched upon it, the fact that the exemption goes to the business owner, not necessarily the business that's in the space, the real estate owner, I should say. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board for Ms. Oliver? Mr. Prisby?
Sorry, Gary. Just one more quick question. Obviously, $913,000 in new growth is a good number, and one that I wouldn't have thought that we would have achieved this particular year. You mentioned that it came from spikes in new growth, in personal property and industrial. Was there one factor in industrial that you saw where they were doing particularly better and we were able to generate more revenue from them this year as opposed to years past?
Yes, for the industrial, it wasn't actually the industrial companies. Basically, all those parcels that were removed from chapter for our solar fields, those are listed under industrial properties. So there was, we had, $10 million in growth in our industrial, and 90% of that has come from those solar fields. Just the property themselves, not the panels, just the property.
So one of the things that we're looking at as the years go on here, we pass an override is sort of this idea of sustainability and predictability. So probably for that particular area, we wouldn't expect to see a similar number in FY22. Okay.
No. And then within personal property, we did get $13 million, a little over almost $14 million in growth on our personal property. And a lot of that had to do with our utilities. So the new substation that went in over on Waterville, all of that was new growth. And our cell tower components, that was all growth. So that's where a lot of the personal property growth came in, which I wasn't expecting to see those high numbers.
Thank you.
So you're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board for Ms. Oliver? This is a public hearing, so opening it up to any of the attendees that have a question. This is a public hearing. So if anyone from the attendees, just use the raise hand function within the Zoom meeting and I can pull you in as a panelist. I'll probably stop sharing my screen. Okay, I'm not seeing anything come up. Okay, if there isn't any other questions from the board, or if there are no attendees that want to come in as a panelist to ask a question, I can entertain a motion to adjourn the public hearing.
Chair,
Mr. Prisby,
I move we adjourn the public hearing.
Second.
Motion made and second to close the public hearing. All those by, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio?
Fazio, I.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, I.
Mr. Prisby?
Frisbee, aye.
Mr. Hoffman?
Often I.
All right, I declare the motion, public hearing closed. Thank you, Ms. Oliver, for that. Before we get into the next part here, on the page here on the agenda, I do want to convey to the board, my apologies. It's the chair's responsibility to review these agendas in detail prior to them being published. And there is, historically, the motion as follows was written in here. Just to help make it easier, and during COVID times, there was a letter that was included that would codify this vote. I want to take personal responsibility for that. We did fix that towards the end of the business today, and I want to thank the people who made that aware of me today. I understand that there may be some concern about this next one here, but keep in mind that this is just for sample motions for us to consider. The board can make any motions it wishes, and by no means does it have to follow what's being prescribed here within our agenda. So at this point in time, I want to take responsibility for that. Reviewing a 120-page packet, can be a little daunting, but this one slipped by and I do take responsibility for it. Without any discussion on that part, or if anyone has any questions, if the board has enough information, we can entertain a motion for tax classification.
Chair.
Mr. Prisby.
I move the board vote to adopt a residential factor of 1.0, no open space discount, no residential exemption, no small commercial exemption, and give authorization to the principal assessor to electronically sign and submit the LA-5 to the DOR.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Thank you. Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All right, I am seeing none. All by roll call vote, please. Mr. Fazio?
Fazio, I.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, I.
Mr. Prisby?
Frisbee, aye.
Mr. Often?
Often I.
Peter Carlson, aye. Okay, declare the motion passed. Thank you very much. I think that's all we needed. Ms. Oliver, was there anything else?
No, I thank you very much for your time, and hope you have a wonderful evening.
I thought I could just convey too from Mr. Prisby, and I think I speak for the board. Thank you very much for that presentation. I think it's one of the most important pieces of information in this town to see about how town finances are generated. And I want to commend you on the format in your description and how you explain that. I said it last year and I'll say it again this year. Thank you very much. And we're very fortunate to have that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
All right. Have a good evening. I asked tonight that the board pass over appointments for Together We Can. We'll bring that back to a future agenda item. Next up here, we have appointments here for Town Administrator, Part-Time Public Safety Dispatcher. Chief Crapo, do you want to give us some background on this?
Thank you. You should have recommendations, and I would assume they're in front of you. As you're aware, Grafton Police Department's always looking for qualified public safety dispatchers. They are very important to our organization, and we like to supplement the pool of part-time dispatchers that we have. You can never have enough, I always say. The first recommendation is for Mark Ricard. He has been coming in to do training at the Grafton Police Department on his own time to become a part-time public safety dispatcher for the Grafton Police Department. He's had all his requisite qualifications, including public safety dispatcher, public safety dispatcher, including power phone, emergency medical dispatch, next generation 911, which is the new 911 that we're using now. And by the way, we're using phase 1 now. So we're getting all cell phone calls to the Grafton Police Department. So when you call from a cell phone, those calls come into us directly. They don't go to the state police barracks, which saves time for them transferring it to us. So there's extra training on that. He has CPR and APCO Public Safety Telecommunicator 1 certifications, which is a 40-hour course. By the way, I know you probably see that a lot, but APCO is the Association of Public Safety Communications Officers. It's a national organization, and they're accredited And in order to get certified as a dispatcher now, you have to take that 40-hour course. So actually, Mr. Ricard's been a dispatcher for over 20 years in various departments, and he saw our posting and applied. So he worked at the police station in dispatch with a senior dispatcher, and based on reviews from the dispatcher and the officers that have worked with him, we're recommending that he be appointed right now a part-time public safety dispatcher.
Thank you. All right, any questions from the board? All right, I'm seeing any type of motion, please.
I move the board vote to affirm the appointment of Mark Ricard as a part-time public safety dispatcher.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion for appointment? Seeing none. All those by roll call vote, please. Mr. Fazio,
DeFazio, aye.
Ms. Roy,
Roy, aye.
Ms. Prisby.
Yeah.
Mr. Often,
Often aye.
Peter Carlson, aye. Declare the motion carried. Thank you. Next up, we have another appointment for Town Administrator, part-time public safety dispatcher, Brittany Stevens. Chief, you want to give us some background on that one?
Yes, instead of going to everything once again, we put out the notice requesting people interested to contact us. Of course, we prefer to have people that have prior experience, and the training saves us money on sending them to the schools that they have to attend. Brittany Stevens had applied with the department. She has been coming in on her own time. She was working in Holden for a short time as an intern and as a dispatcher, and she has all the requisite qualifications, as I mentioned earlier. And based on reviews from dispatchers and police officers that have worked with her dispatching, being shadowed by a full-time dispatcher, of course, we're recommending that she be appointed as a part-time public safety dispatcher.
Thank you. Any questions for the chief? Okay, I entertain a motion.
I move the board vote to affirm the appointment of Brittany Stevens as a part-time public safety dispatcher.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion of appointment? Seeing none, all those by roll call vote, please. Mr. Fazio,
DeFazio, aye.
Ms. Roy,
Roy, aye.
Mr. Prisby.
Yeah.
Mr. Often,
Often aye.
Peter Carlson, I declare the motion carried. Chief, thank you very much for coming in. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Yep, thank you.
Bye.
Okay, so next up here, we have action designation of local public safety or health officials. I was going to say, Carter, did you want to give us a background on this? This is something we have to adopt for tonight.
Sure. We're a day or two out of the calendar, but when they passed the statute that allowed the moderator a wider liberty to recess meetings for not only public safety but public health reasons as well, they put in a requirement that within 10 days after the declaration of recess and continuance of the town meeting, that the Board of Selectmen designate a public health or local public safety official to submit a report. It's pretty straightforward. It's 3 paragraphs. It's written, but technically it needs to be signed by the chief of police or the chair of the Board of Health. I'm not completely sure who the moderator consulted with or whether or not he did consult with folks, but either of those parties can sign that in the next day or two. Pretty straightforward, something that, as I say, is not complied with across the Commonwealth, but being that we are aware of it, we should attempt to comply in relatively short order.
Okay. So I know we've got Chief Crapo here tonight. I didn't know how the board felt. I'm not sure which the former town moderator who they may have consulted with. At this point in time, as chair, I feel comfortable giving that signatory over to Chief Crapo if he'll accept, but I didn't know how the rest of the board felt about that, or if they have any other questions, concerns. No, if you wanted to bring them up. Okay. At that point, I can entertain a motion.
I move the board vote to designate Chief Crapo to submit the necessary report to the Attorney General providing justification for the postponement of Grafton's 2020 semi-annual town meeting.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none. All those by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio?
Fazio, I.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, I.
Mr. Prisby?
Frisbee, aye.
Mr. Often?
Often aye.
Peter Carlson, aye. I declare the motion carried 5-0. Thank you very much. Chief, do you have any questions?
No.
Okay.
Oh, it should be easy. Thanks.
All right, thank you. So next up here, we have declaration of disposal of surplus items as part of Mass General Law. Government has to bring up a list of these and the board has to vote on it. I have Mr. Berger here tonight to provide some insight into this. And he did share some photos for me to have for tonight. So if you just give me one moment, I will pull them up.
While you pull that up, Carter, you had your hand up for that last item. Did you want-
I just wanted to thank the chief and let him know that the letter's short and pretty easy.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Berger?
Mr. Chair, for the past 8-9 years, whenever there was an office being remodeled or there were surplus items, people just put things on the stage. So on the stage, we have broken fixtures, we have broken tables, we have broken file cabinets, we have monitors that are as old as 1980. We just have all this surplus material that it's like McPhee's closet. You go up there, you open the door, it's all going to fall down. So either we're going to try to sell it to somebody or we're going to get a metal dumpster in there and start throwing the stuff away and cleaning up. And I'm asking for this board approval to let's start throwing the trash away.
This evening, I have some photographs if the board wishes to see them. Bob, did you want to go through that with us?
You just throw them up there and we can look at it and I'll
I like showing trash.
right. So what you're looking at is old file cabinets, locks work, locks don't work, old tables from the 80s. The actual table that you can see on the left-hand side, that's not going to get thrown away. That's something that the Historic Society wants to refinish. That's probably about, I don't know, 80 years old, but it's in tough shape. You have Christmas decorations. The old monitors you're looking at, keep on going. You get some other good stuff there. Yeah. Old light fixtures, those came from the gym ceiling. We changed out the fixtures to a LED. These are the old style that either work or don't work. I think half of them don't work. More computers. More computers. Tables, monitors.
More monitors.
It's a printer that just is useless. It does not work. I mean, if something had no home, this is just a typical. This is a flat file that won't open because it's crushed. These are plants, fake plants that as soon as COVID came in, these were in the hallway and I didn't want a dust collector there because you have to keep it clean. So again, threw it on the stage. That should just be thrown away. This picture, if anybody was here when we had Russ Connors, this was his going away gift, but he forgot to take it to Florida, so it ended up on the stage. It's a very nice picture of Grafton. 1980s table that was in the front hallway. I don't know if we'd throw that away or not. That may go back in the hallway after we allowed people back in the building. It was a nice place for somebody to sit and wait. But I just wanted to give you the full old doors. That's what that picture is representing.
And that's it.
Christmas decorations and more garbage. And we put shelves up in the gym because the problem with putting the shelves up is when you put a shelf up, you're gonna put something on that shelf.
All right. Any
And
questions?
this is my pain.
Any questions for Mr. Berger on the declaration of disposal of surplus items? Ms. Roy?
All the computers we just saw, none of them work, right? There's no security risk if we were to throw them all in a dumpster?
Those were monitors, and the computers that you did see, we take the hard drive, we destroy the hard drive. That's protocol.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I move the board vote to authorize the disposal of all related computer items through the town electronic recycling program and metals through the disposal of the local processing facility.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Carter, I noticed your hand is still up. Did you want me to lower that?
I just wanted to be clear. Ms. Roy asked about the computers going into a dumpster. They do not. They are properly recycled through the electronics recycling program.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none. All those by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio?
Fazio, aye.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, aye.
Mr. Prisby?
Frisbee, aye.
Mr. Often?
Often I.
Carlson, I declare the motion carried.
Select
Bob, is that it for tonight?
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Have a great night.
Okay,
right.
thank you.
Next up here, under new business, we have intent to sell 57 Tulip Circle. Carter, did you want to give some insight on this? Or, I mean, we've done this before about an affordable unit.
Yeah, basically you have the right to purchase, but in this case, the recommendation is to allow it to go through the normal and ordinary sales process. And Mr. Prisby may wish to comment from the Affordable Housing Trust. He may have additional insight.
Yeah, nothing too additional. This is what we typically do. Rather than take the property back ourselves, we send it CHAPA's way, and CHAPA, has their lottery folks put it back out on the market as affordable. So this is pretty standard.
Thank you. Any questions before we go into a motion? Seeing none, I can entertain a motion.
I move the board vote to not exercise its right to purchase the affordable unit located at 57 Tulip Circle.
Motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those by roll call vote, please. Mr. Fazio?
Fazio, aye.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, aye.
Mr. Prisby?
Frisbee, aye.
Mr. Often?
Often I.
Carlson, I declare the motion carried. Thank you. Next up here, so under new business, we have vote to authorize chair to sign 2021 for animal control officer. Mr. Terenzini, do you want to give some insight into this?
You are engaged in a regional animal control officer program. They can, under the terms of the intermunicipal agreement, work across borders. However, one host community, in this case Westboro, cannot issue the warrants that are needed for a member community. Those must be issued community by community. Therefore, Westboro, Grafton need to issue their own. In this case, this is an annual undertaking, as I understand it.
Thank you. Any questions on this? Okay, I can entertain a motion.
I move the board vote to authorize the chairman to sign the warrant for Melinda McKendrick, Town of Westboro, ACO, and Keith Elms, Town of Shrewsbury, ACO.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio?
Fazio, aye.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, aye.
Mr. Prisby?
Frisbee, aye.
Mr. Often?
Often I.
Carlson, I. Thank you very much. Declare the motion carried. Next up here, we under new business, we have an action to vote and sign the annual salt contracts. We have Mr. Kadori here to provide some background on this. Paul?
Good evening. So this is a yearly task for us. We're in a consortium with several other communities. And Shrewsbury does the bidding for those communities. So we have a primary and a secondary bidder. Where the bids work, we buy 70% of our salt from the low bidder or the primary, and 30% from the secondary, or the slightly higher. The rationale of having two is that if one contractor can't supply, we have a backup no matter what. And that's, a few times a year that seems to happen. One outfit gets busy and the other one isn't. So that's why there's two different contracts at a slightly different price, like 19 cents a ton.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Canoyer? Mr. Fazio?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Paul, I don't recall this being a problem last year, but is there any time in history where we've run out of salt and had to go back, and does that change the contract at all, or do we just add more?
There's no limit to it. We've never had a problem obtaining it. So Kevin's right on. And we have more storage with the new building, so.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Canoyer? All right, seeing none, I can entertain a motion.
I move the board vote to authorize the chairman to sign the Eastern Minerals Incorporated contract as the preliminary or primary salt supplier for the town of Grafton in FY21 at the cost of $46.50 per ton.
I have a second. Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none. All those by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio?
Fazio, aye.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, aye.
Mr. Frisbee?
Frisbee, aye.
Mr. Often?
Often I.
Peter Carlson, aye. Thank you. Declare the motion carried, and I can entertain the second motion.
I move the board vote to authorize the chairman to sign the Morton Salt Incorporated contract as a secondary salt supplier for the town of Grafton in FY21 at the cost of $46.69 per ton.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none. All those by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio?
Fazio, aye.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, aye.
Mr. Frisbee?
Frisbee, aye.
Mr. Often?
Often I.
Carlson, aye. Declare the motion carried. Thank you very much. Paul, I think that's all I have for you. Unless there's anything else. I think that's it.
Nope.
All right. Have a great evening. Thank you.
You too. Thank you all.
All right. I'm just getting down the list here. All right. Next up here, we have a motion to action to vote to sign recreation ADA contracts pending project of funding approval at town meeting this Saturday. This evening, we have our Parks and Recreation Director, Ms. Anderson, here to provide some insight into what is being asked here for tonight. Ms. Anderson, do you want to have the floor?
Sure. Yeah, I'll let you tell you whatever you need to know, but hopefully you've seen our proposal to CPC for the request of funding at town meeting. If not, I'm happy to go into more detail, but to summarize, this project would create accessible routes within our parks and accessible surfacing within our playgrounds. So we're seeking $210,000 in CPC funds at town meeting. The contract you have in front of you is for the work to be performed in the amount of just over $154,000. And then we would additionally purchase the materials needed directly on top of that. So we were trying to put this in front of you at town meeting on the 19th to vote for the chair to sign upon passage of the article versus waiting to your next scheduled meeting tonight. So work could begin immediately after town meeting. The contractors lined up, and obviously the change in weather is looming. But when town meeting was rescheduled, it was left on the agenda for tonight, which again is still prior to town meeting. But if you approve it, it will still help again the start of this project based on the vote on Saturday. So I'm hoping that helps with the info that you might need, but happy to answer any questions or give you more info.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Any questions? So this motion will be, the funding mechanism of this motion will be contingent upon the passage of Article 8 at the 2020 semi-annual town meeting. Mr. Often, and then Ms. Fazio.
Thanks. Yeah, I've had some concern expressed about the Nelson Park. So it's sort of related to this topic. I just want to make sure that we have some clarification around what the town's position is towards who should fund the ADA remediation for that park. So I would ask Carter, can you clarify, because that particular park has a trust associated with it. And I just want to make sure that we understand who's going to fund improvements to that park, because ultimately, all of the parks in town need to have ADA compliance, that one included. But there was some, I guess, confusion or misunderstanding maybe about who was going to fund that. So I don't want that to get in the way of the discussions or approval of the CPC articles at town meeting. So I think it's important for us to have an understanding of that going into town meeting.
We can try to have that for you before you go into town meeting, Mr. Upton.
Thank you.
Any other, Mr. Fazio?
Thank you. I just had a comment, and that is that, although I was a supporter in June of Super Park, that I'm glad to see a solution for our community to use this funding for installing ADA accessible routes and surfacing. And I think it sends a message that we heard concerns at town meeting and took action. So I want to thank Recreation, the Disabilities Commission, and I think Colleen has also been an advocate for these projects. So I just wanted to say thank you, and I hope the public will consider voting in favor of this passage of Article 8 at town meeting.
Thank you. Any other discussion, questions? I guess, Ms. Anderson, I've got a question for you here. So to Mr. Often's point of clarification, and maybe you can lend some insight into here tonight, or we can wait, but about the Nelson Trust area, is that currently managed under the Town of Grafton's rec department that you oversee today?
It's not. And so that wasn't, part of what I was immediately trying to address. In hindsight, I probably could have approached the trust and tried to see what they wanted to do and what we could incorporate with this, because they don't seem to have a lot of oversight, right? I mean, Skip is involved and he has the answers, but I mean, they don't have any funding for that property. But just looking with what we were trying to immediately accomplish and the time frame that we had to turn this around in, I didn't attempt to try to put that under our umbrella, but
Okay.
I do reach out to Skip once in a while and say, hey, I think you might need some more mulch. I think, those sorts of things, and he'll scrape together some funds. But in speaking with him briefly about just addressing all of the ADA needs in all of our parks, which we have almost accomplished in 6 of our locations. Besides this is the biggest and most crucial part to all of it that needs to get done according to that transition plan. Skip just didn't know where to turn because they don't have a budget at all to do anything there.
Personally, and this is just me talking here, if the Nelson Trust would want to seek potential CPC funds, I would hope the board would join me in supporting that initiative if that's possible. I would like to encourage, if Nelson is listening, anyone from the Nelson Trust is listening tonight, to maybe look into that as a source of revenue to maybe address some of the ADA compliance that the other parks in Grafton are going through. And, I would be in favor of that. So thank you. All right. Thank you for that insight, Ms. Anderson. All right. Any other discussion on this motion? I mean, I'm sorry, before we get into motion, any other questions for Ms. Anderson before we get into a motion? All right, seeing none, I can entertain a motion.
I move the board vote to authorize the chairman to sign the contract with Design Build LLC, doing business as Childscapes, in the amount of $154,436.52, contingent upon the passage of Article 8 at the 2020 semi-annual town meeting.
Second.
I have a motion made and seconded. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those by roll call vote, please. Mr. Fazio?
Fazio, aye.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, aye.
Mr. Prisby?
Frisbee, aye.
Mr. Often?
Often I.
Peter Carlson, I declare the motion carried. Thank you, Ms. Anderson, for coming in tonight. I
you,
appreciate
everybody.
that. Look forward to Saturday. Yep.
Yeah, there you go.
Next up here, we have action to vote for CMRPC representative and alternate. The board needs to appoint a delegate to the CMRPC as well as an alternate. The two appointees need to be residents of Grafton. There was a memo in the past. It was the TA served as the delegate with the select board member serving as the alternate. So at this point in time, do we want to appoint? The board has any questions or discussion on this before we get into a motion? What's your thoughts? Is any board member can do this and be an alternate or a representative of the CMRPC? Mr. Often.
Yeah, I'm happy to be the alternate.
Okay. All right. In the meantime, so I don't know how we want to handle this, Mr. Terenzini. I mean, you're here on a temporary basis. We're looking forward to serving out for a few more months, obviously, until we get to a permanent appointment. I'm not sure if appointing you, I just want to ask the board, I mean, I don't know what the board wants to do for the other appointment. If it wants to identify another board member, Mr. Often.
So as the alternate, I'm happy to attend the meetings and represent our appointment until we get a permanent town administrator in place, if that's helpful.
Okay, it works by me. Any other questions or comments to that? Any suggestions from the board? All right, I'm not seeing any. Want to entertain a motion to just appoint the alternate at this time to CMRPC?
I move the board vote to appoint Matt Often as the alternate to the Central Mass Regional Planning Commission.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Thank you, Matt, for stepping up. Seeing none, all those by roll call vote, please. Mr. Fazio?
Fazio, aye.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, aye.
Mr. Prisby?
Frisbee, aye.
Mr. Often?
Often I.
Carlson, aye. Declare the motion carried. Thank you, Matt. We appreciate that. So tonight, next up, we have new business here, amendment to the classification plan. Mr. Terenzini, do you want to guide us through this?
Please, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, we do not have a town accountant as present on staff. We have been using a consultant contract with Eric Kinshirf's firm. The position has been empty since early June. You did advertise, you went out, narrowed it down to a couple of folks. And truthfully, when I looked at the last two, I just wasn't comfortable in bringing them forth. In talking with some of the staff, the former town accountant and the town auditor, the idea was that perhaps to try to move to more of a finance director position. That would require some additional monies, but those additional monies were thought to enhance our attractiveness to applicants and also having the expanded responsibilities. It is not a full finance director. They'll have general supervision over the treasury and collections, IT, and the assessing, and then they'll have their own responsibilities. As part of expanded responsibilities, I'm proposing that we move the preparation of revenue projections, templates for the budget, compilation of the budget for review by the town administrator into that office, which would then set the stage to realign some of the work tasks of the position of assistant town administrator. The challenge in attracting financial professionals is difficult right now. They are in short supply and high demand. I can tell you that I'm trying to recruit them in 2 other towns, and it's just simply a real challenge today. This would be competitive with several other recruitments that are going on right now in terms of the job description and the pay rate. Millbury's currently advertising for a finance director around this point, as are 2 other towns. So I think the draft job description lines up with some needs that we have, allows us to increase the pay a little bit, and allows us to increase the financial attractiveness. So on the assistant town administrator side, once we've made those moves by reallocating some of the duties that had been in that office, and I've described to you how the capital improvements program, the solicitation of proposals, the compiling of those, and getting those on to the capital improvements committee has been moved out of the assistant town administrator as well. Puts us in a position to have what I think the position was really needed to be doing, which was analyzing management issues, analyzing, as was brought up the other night, the waste disposal agreement, which I've come to find out you have 3, and none of them expire at the exact same year you have. So there's, that's the kind of hot potato you toss somebody and say, you need to spend some time on these. And it's going to be a difficult position to fill, as I've outlined it, but it envisions someone in the organization taking responsibility for, I think, what I've called the public engagement officer, if you will. I don't know if anybody else is using that term, but we put that in this job description. And that's an effort to try to get the organization to accept, embrace, and practice expanded use of social media, press releases, community television, the website, and the like. So this person, management analyst and communication specialist, is what we propose to call it, would be in the town administrator's office, would continue to do management analysis, grants, support departments in implementation of their initiatives, and hopefully give us someone who's really wedded to the idea of the need for us to embrace all of these new forms of communication towards engaging with the public, not only on getting information in, but on getting information out and trying to increase participation in government. With those 2 job descriptions revised, we looked at using the chart that came out of your 2011 study as to where they should be put, consulted with the person who actually did your 2011 study, and to propose those changes in the classifications. So you can see that if they were classified, the management analyst and communication specialist would be at that grade level 4 from roughly 50 to 71,000. This is your FY20 chart here. There was not one done for FY21 that we could find on record. And your town accountant would be moved from a grade level 5, which had topped at 92,000. That was one of the challenges that you had in recruiting, and would move that to a grade level 6, which starts around 79 on the low end and tops around 113. I'd like to think we could get someone in the 100,000 plus or minus range. That's certainly Millbury's hope as they go about doing this. I think it gives us an expanded title, expanded pay on the town accountant side. And I think that it focuses, by rearranging some of those tasks, focuses the tasks in the administration office and embraces the board's desire to try to get the organization, as I say, to embrace, engage in, and practice greater means and greater uses of today's media. Happy to answer questions on the job descriptions. They're there. They are drafts. They're being fully vetted. But I think that you can have enough detail there to make a determination as to whether or not the placement on the compensation plan is appropriate. Happy to answer questions as to the thought process and how I came to propose this.
So Peter's muted. I'm just
I
gonna.
agree. Thank you. Sorry, does anyone from the board member, someone just won bingo tonight. Does anyone from the board have any questions for Mr. Terenzini? Ms. Roy, and then I think Mr. Frisbee had his arm up next.
So you started off by describing him as, or the person as a finance director / accountant, but not a full finance director. And then you listed off a lot of responsibilities. What's missing from the responsibility list that would make it a full finance director?
Well, a full finance director would actually have a department of finance, an office of finance under them, and have far greater control over those other staff than we envision here. The other thing that it would have most likely is being tasked with full procurement responsibilities and with greater involvement in actually doing the budget. What we envision here is someone who would prepare the templates, get it all distributed, collect it, compile, a little bit more along the lines of what Chris McGoldrick is doing for the CIPC.
So as you said, you were looking for this person in a couple other communities and you're finding it difficult. Would it be easier if we made it a full finance director to get that and staff it as, you know, time goes on? Just, you know what I mean?
I really don't think so. I think that the main thing here is to get that title going, get that pay moved up, see how this works, because there's some other moving pieces going on at the same time. What can we do with planning on the capital side? There's some challenges in there because we need to make some changes. Strike that. You will need to discuss some changes over time to get that office more integrated, supportive of Affordable Housing Trust and other tasks. This is just a plain tough position to fill right now. I'm not sure that trying to make it, you know, getting down more in the nitty gritty and tying things down more till you see how this really works is going to enhance your recruitment much, Colleen.
Thank you. Mr. Frisbee?
Let me just say that I do think that being able to move from 92 into advertising it for 100 plus or minus DOQ, DOE is going to make a difference. Just going to that 3 figures and having the ability to top up a little bit if we need to is going to make a difference, as opposed to 79,000 is what I pay in a town of 8,000 people north of you. You're going to be, you just can't recruit at the level that you're at, I don't believe.
Thank you. Mr. Frisbee?
Thanks, Carter. I like your thought process here. And, you know, honestly, this was the sort of thing I was hoping you would be able to provide us with an assessment of how we can maybe reorganize, be more efficient, and then solve some of our personnel needs. With the grade 4 compensation in this particular position, does that line up with the other job descriptions and pay rates for everybody else in the office? Do you know? So I guess to be honest with you, the uncomfortable question I'm asking is this person going to be paid as much as the person who is going to be overseeing staff?
Are you talking about the management analyst?
Yeah. So I think I said that wrong. Are the people that the management analyst is supervising and directing going to be paid more than this person?
So the management analyst is not supervising anyone on a day-to-day regular basis in that office. That
Okay.
is the responsibility of the town administrator, as I envision that. There may be time to time from when they have the lead on something. There may be an occasion, a week or two when the town administrator's gone and somebody kind of looks to that as the next professional in the office, or the town administrator made a delegation to. There may from time to time be college interns or volunteers, and there may be time to time when they are leading a team of department heads or other peers. But in terms of, do the two folks that work at that front desk, those boots on the ground, report to this person? No, I don't envision that being the structure with this revised job proposal.
Okay, so that leads me to my second question is, I suppose then some of the duties that Becca had are going to then have to be absorbed by other people, either back up to the permanent town administrator or to staff.
Well, when I looked at what the tasks were, it was to compile the capital plan. If this works, this is evolutionary. The solicitation of projects and the compilation of projects has now basically moved to the planning staff. We've got some issues in there long-term if you're going to stay competitive. Those proposals are now being vetted by the CIPC and ranked.
Mhm.
And so when the town administrator gets that report, he's basically going to have this 1 page or 2 page of projects ranked top to bottom. And he will apply capital rationing to those. So that task to some degree goes away other than support from planning. The next major task was the doing of the budget. What did that consist of? That consisted of preparing templates for use by the departments. That would move to the accounting/finance unit, if you will. The collecting and compiling of the data, that would still happen in accounting, in finance. But then the actual review of the budget, to me, in a town of your size, can and should be done by the town administrator. That's where he really gets his hands, or she gets their hands dirty. I know all the numbers in my budget, and that's because I've gone through every single page with the department head. Now, putting the report together, the 400 and plus pages, and getting catalog cuts and doing all that stuff. Oh yeah, that's still going to stay with the management and us, if you will, because I think that's the administrator has other things to do. So I think that as you look at the way this is reorganized, it is, and some things that were done by the assistant town administrator, quite frankly, perhaps could have been and should have been done by departments, but they had somebody who was willing to take them on. And I think that, some of those would be better left inside the department, where they, rather than coming downstairs and saying, what did you do with this? What did you do with that? I think some of that could stay with the departments, and they'd have a better handle on it there. Would this person be available to assist them if they could? Of course. It's a different view of the office from someone who's only been there a couple months. You might want to wait. Maybe somebody has a different view. But I think that this could clarify some roles and make some sense. You're one of only 2 towns your size that has a formal assistant town administrator.
Before we go any further, I just want to acknowledge that Barry wanted to come in and ask a question. I'll do that in a few minutes after the board has gone through. Mr. Opton?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment a little bit on the job description for the finance director. I think it's important for us to point out the fact that we've got a full-time finance director for the education department, to help them understand really that there's some collaboration and the fact that like a fair part of our budget with some complexity and obviously size is managed by a full-time role in the school department. So I think that's important, and potentially also We want to talk a little bit about the potential for bringing in a strong chief as well, because obviously they'll have their own budget. So just, I want to characterize the position well to help them understand that although this is kind of a standalone position and there's not this office that's reporting in, that there's a lot of complementary roles in town that will all be working together towards putting together that financial picture and managing the budget and long-term projections and whatnot.
Thank you. Mr. Fazio.
Thank you. Carter, you just explained, and I'm starting to understand your thought process for the management analyst and communications specialist role. And in my opinion, I see an ATA role as a generalist position that we can add and take away responsibilities as needed for the town. So the way I see it, a management analyst and communications specialist are actually roles that could be filled by an ATA. We could just structure and make their responsibilities that role. And then furthermore, the title of an ATA holds more weight for those applying to the position, and which I believe would bring more qualified candidates. So I understand the argument for different responsibilities being shifted to other departments, and I agree with that. But we can't guarantee that it will remain that way in the future, depending on needs and also how the new TA manages his department and department heads. And so I'm in favor of what I'm hearing about the finance director role. And I know it's critically important as we approach budget season, especially that we are fully staffed. But that is one concern that I have, is just I don't want to be flipping back and forth between positions. And I'm just trying to understand a little more clearly your thought process in changing, because you said, it's not really going to shift costs too much in that role. And so why wouldn't we just keep it a generalist position, in your opinion?
I think that there's merit to what you're saying. One of the other roles that the ATA had was as HR director. I guess my concern or thought process was that specialized functions such as the HR, the budget, the capital, really should rest in those specialized units and use the ATA on the management analyst side and this public engagement officer and sort of, if you will, pinch hitter to be where they are. There is some added clout to having the ATA name. When I spoke with several folks in terms of recruiting who are currently management analysts in two other communities, one of the things they said was, do try to think about keeping the ATA title because it would most likely lead to stronger recruitment. So I don't think that if that thought process, the only difference is that a ATA revised job description slightly with all these things we have here would probably be more likely a level 5 once we added some of those generalist functions back into it. Pluses and minuses, I would, if the board would like me to go in that direction, I can certainly refine that a little bit, and that will easily move into the level 5 classification at that point. But I do think that the very specific functions that that job was doing on the the capital, the budget, and the HR really should rest in those more discipline-specific departments.
Thank you. Ms. Roy?
So some of those responsibilities that you think should be laying in the other departments, if we have the ATA, do you think, just given the culture in Grafton, those duties will kind of naturally go back to the ATA person, because those other departments might not feel inclined to want to do it because the ATA has always done it. Why am I doing it now?
Well, it's, I guess, BC before Carter and AC after Carter. If this is the philosophy and it's laid out, and I regret in some ways I won't be with you longer than I will be, but I think that this is a good realignment of functions. I will say this, in whatever way you want to proceed, I truly think you need to get those jobs filled. We're at a critical juncture. I don't have the institutional knowledge. We have one department, well, 3 employees, critical importance. You're working with 1 full-time staffer right now, plus a little cheerleading and support from your office, from the TA's office. We don't have a full-time town accountant. We have a lot of functions that normally were done by the ATA that it's been hard to move over to stuff, and we're going to miss a beat or 2 or 3, if only those. So we can proceed in whatever fashion you want. I understand Ms. DeFazio's thoughts, and those can be easily adjusted. The only thing I suggest to you is that would move it to a level 4, which still at the starting range, I think we could get someone in with you who would serve your needs well.
All right.
And let me just say, also, it's the administrator and the ATA. If departments are pushing things off, sometimes you just have to say, I'm sorry, we can't take that off. Happy to help you in any way we can. But that really is a discipline-specific project that needs to stay in your department.
Thank you. The board's okay. I'm just going to let Barry come in and ask his question. I'm assuming it's Barry Smith.
Hey, there we are. So the quick question, will the proposed finance director also be the town accountant, or do we hire another accountant?
It's one and the same. I think over time you need to look at, you've got payroll being processed in your HR department, which is not the norm for me. So there might be some monies in here where you might need to add a half-time person in the accounting office as these jobs get moved around. But the intent at this point in time is that the position is one single position of finance director / town accountant.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions from Mr. Terenzini? Next steps.
Well, I think, Mr. Chairman, if folks are agreed that the revisions to the job description that I am proposing for the finance director and town accountant are worthy of consideration and merit, and having looked at the job description, that it does fit into the level that we're proposing, that could be taken as a standalone issue, and then we could have some brief conversation about Ms. DeFazio's thoughts and classification of such a position. Again, the job descriptions are presented for the purposes of trying to make you feel comfortable that the classification is correct.
So is that agreeable by the board?
Or does the board wish me to come back with further revisions?
Anybody?
Can you just, what is it that you're suggesting, Mr. Terenzini, to accommodate?
I'm suggesting that you deal with the 2 positions separately, that we deal with the proposed reclassification of the town accountant who is currently at grade level 5 as a town accountant, that we rename that job finance director / town accountant, and we reclassify it at grade level 6. And so if you believe that makes sense, if you believe that the job description and the means of classifying them and the other grades that are in that grade level, the other positions in that are town engineer, town planner, your wastewater superintendent, your DPW director. I would submit that the person who's keeping all the books and making sure we get good clean audits and doing all of that is certainly equivalent to the town planner and the town engineer and should be at grade level 6.
Okay. Mr. Opton.
Yeah, I'd agree with the classification change for that particular position, as well as the characterization of it for sure. It's a solid proposal. I think this is something that's come in repeatedly in our financial audits, that's been called out as sort of an aberration and an ask from the auditors to bring in a finance director for the town. For me, that's just sort of a no-brainer. It makes perfect sense. The only thing that I would ask is that we just add some color to the job description around, working with the other, those other positions. But it makes sense to me.
Okay. Anybody else? Mr. Terenzini, I would agree with Ms. Roy, Mr. Often's sentiment here. I'm in favor of the reclassification. I do agree that this has been something that's been on the town's radar for quite some time. I believe reclassifying the position, changing the title would get the appropriate skill set for that department that you've outlined here. So I think, from what I'm hearing from Mr. Often is that I would elaborate a bit more on the job description component about the collaboration with the other departments. Is that correct, Mr. Often? And is there anything else?
I would look forward to Mr. Often's comments. We can incorporate them. We can also incorporate any other minor changes that folks want to see. As I say, it's presented for the purposes of you seeing the tasks, the education, and how these are classified. So you can say, geez, Carter, I looked at that job description. That's really not a level 6. Or you can say, gee, Carter, I looked at that job description. I looked at the chart. I think it's really a level 7. I think you're off base. So if you're comfortable at level 6, we can refine this job description. But I would ask that you consider moving to amend the classification plan to classify the position of finance director and town accountant as a grade level 6.
Okay.
And would we be addressing the management analyst and communication specialist tonight or holding that off?
My
Hold off on
suggestion
that, Ms.
is,
Roy. I'm sorry, we were going to hold off on that position per direction of Carter a few moments ago. So we're just dealing with the finance director, town accountant classification at this point.
yes, then I would like to move on, but I propose separate them so we could move the issue forward.
Okay. Anyone want to make a motion?
I move the board vote to accept the amended classification plan, upgrading the position of town accountant to finance director / town accountant as presented.
Second.
I have a motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? So just for the record, when we're updating the classification, we're just making that classification a 6 for this position. Anything else for the discussion, just to put on the record for this? I don't think so.
Not for this position, no.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, all those by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio,
DeFazio, aye.
Ms. Roy,
Roy, aye.
Mr. Prisby,
Frisbee, aye.
Mr. Often,
Often, aye.
Peter Carlson, aye. Okay, declare the motion carried 5-0. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your support on that one. We will get that advertised within the next week or so, and I'm going to coordinate with Bernie. I think that the final interviews on that might well line up with once you have your finalists. And I'd like to try to integrate that if I can here. Moving on, the management analyst and communication specialist. I think you've seen how that one has been realigned. I've heard some concerns about maybe it needs a bit more of a generalist approach in a little bit more a sense of authority. I think that we could easily revisit that job description and retain that title if you would like. That would make it a grade level 5 by making those few additions because of the sense of responsibility, if I'm hearing correctly. One thing that I would like to try to preserve in it, and I don't want to mislead you, finding someone who's going to be a great management analyst, numbers geek, if you will. You know, when we were looking for colleges, my stepdaughter said she wanted to go to Bentley because she wanted to be in finance. And we said, that's a horrible thing because you just love to talk with people. She ended up quitting finance so she could go into communications because she loves talking with people in social media. So I don't want to mislead you. This will be difficult to find this skill set. But the important thing that I was trying to do here was to get into somebody's position, a responsibility to try to get the organization to embrace the need to engage the public and to, as you identified at your goal-setting retreats, to embrace the new means of communication as a formal part of our process. And I don't know anybody in the organization right now that I could just say, how'd you like to go do this? I don't think we have a good fit. So I'm hopeful that we can find the right fit in this position.
Okay, any questions, discussions? Mr. Fazio?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I just want to reiterate very quickly, I think the position that you've laid forward is spot on. I think this is exactly what Grafton needs right now. In my opinion, was just questioning the title because I think, in my opinion, that an ATA, we could assign an ATA right now to do this work. So my two concerns that I wanted to bring up to the board tonight was, one, this may be a difficult position to fill and we're short-staffed and then we're getting into budget season and there are, probably a lot of qualified people to come in as an ATA. And the second thing is, Carter, you're a temporary TA. And so we don't know who we're going to hire and how they're going to want to manage their department. And if they're adding on responsibilities or taking responsibilities away, shifting, hiring other people. And so unable to predict that, what I want to avoid doing is switching this position and making it, like turning it back to an ATA in a year because that's what a new TA wants. Because I believe that an ATA title could do this this position as you have listed it out. So that's my argument. I tend to think of that position, especially in a town that's short-staffed, is kind of a catch-all. And right now, I really like the way you've put responsibility as on other department heads, but we don't know moving forward, what other things Grafton is going to be looking at down the road, what other positions may leave us, and we need someone to jump in and help out and assist. And so that's why I always, kind of stand behind the ATA title for that reason. To me, it's a little safer, honestly. So that's all. That's my argument.
And, in one community, it's called assistant to the town administrator, and then it does these tasks. In another town, there is an assistant town administrator. If you like the job description and you like the sense of direction, and your concern is one of consistency of message and having someone with sufficient authority to do the things that need to be done, this could easily retain that assistant town administrator, but with this revised job description. I would, however, suggest that it would most likely be not a grade 6, but that this revision would be assistant town administrator at a grade level 5, because it's not going to have the same depth of function as responsibility as does the current job description. Continuing to call it assistant town administrator, keeping it at level 5, which knocks it down a little bit, I think could, if the board members, share those thoughts, or to the extent they share those thoughts, I think that could get us there.
Any other discussion? Mr. Alton and then Ms. Roy.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I guess my observation is that we are devolving already out of necessity some of these job responsibilities. We have, I think we're going to be taking a lot of the budgetary responsibilities and conferring those with the town administrator. I think that's going to happen naturally because as we bring somebody in new, they're not going to have that institutional knowledge. They're going to have to really dig into the nuts and bolts of what's happening in town. They're going to have a very hands-on approach for the first couple of years. We're taking the capital management piece. We're sort of bringing that over into planning. We're also embracing CIPC and the work that they'll do. So I think, we're sort of naturally taking some of these things off of the ATA role. I'm really sensitive to budget, and I think in order to be able to pay for that reclassification of the, into the finance director position, we have to have some offset for that. And so, trying to be sensitive to budget and our tax dollars, I'm actually in favor of sort of having that that classification to a 4 for the ATA position and making it something slightly different. I'm concerned about having it a classification 4 and trying to hire an assistant town administrator. I also, I guess, my last comment for now is just I really didn't like how things played out, I guess, over the past year with having to be in a very uncomfortable position with our ATA and that whole transition plan just didn't work out very well. So that combined with, I'm not completely convinced that we need a class 5 or class 6 ATA. I like the direction that Carter's gone in with the role. I like the classification as a 4. So I'd be more in favor of that. We could call it an ATA, but I'd be concerned about hiring an ATA at a class 4. I guess that would be my concern with that.
Mr. Tranzini, I'm sorry, Mr. Tranzini, then Ms. Roy, then Mr. Prisby.
I believe that even if you left it at ATA, effectively what you would be doing is you're at grade level 5. I think that trying to hire an ATA at grade level 4 will be difficult. Their expectations will be higher. However, this is expense neutral, if you will. In fact, I think you were paying your accountant 90 plus going out. If we can hire someone at 100, that's up 10. But you were paying your ATA 92. I would expect somebody to enter in the 65 to 70 range. So you've got 10. That's a savings of let's say 20. Let's say you hired at 22. So you put 10 into your finance director, you're still 10 ahead, if you will. I think that from an expense side, if you call them an ATA and put them in at grade level 5, it's neutral at worst, and the odds are that when you have to support what could conceivably be the increase in the budget for the town administrator salary, which as it's carried in the budget, and I know some of it's kind of off that department's budget. I'm not sure where you were funding this contribution to the 401k or 457B. I would consider this expense neutral or even expense advantage to yours, even after reclassification, Mr. Upton.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Roy, and then Mr. Prisby.
I just want to say I agree with Mr. Terenzini's plan. I like the idea of a management analyst and a communications specialist. I like some of the descriptions he said where they would be responsible for like a public engagement officer. We have a very engaged public in Grafton, and somebody labeled as a communications specialist, I think is a lot more approachable than an assistant town administrator who's assistant town administrator who's becoming a catch-all, and their plate could be filling up a lot faster, and then they start missing the mark on the things that we really want them to be focusing on, which is our social media and grants and things like that. So I really like where Carter's going with this.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Prisby.
Yeah, I tend to agree, and I share the same concern that Matt had with, we've had a number of openings here over the past few months, and we need to fill them, not only for our short-term concerns, though, but what we see and envision this office being over the longer term. And as Matt said, we've had a number of accountants and audits saying that, a finance director position was needed. And when we started talking about this, I started to wonder, well, if we did that, could we shift some of the responsibilities off of the ATA onto that person to not only be more efficient in specializing, but also to be more efficient from a cost perspective to the taxpayer? And I share the same concern that if you took this management person and gave them the ATA title, you're at the very least starting them at a step 5. And what we've seen over the course of a few years is you can get somebody with a little less experience at a step 5, but very quickly that position increases in cost. So you end up having to justify to a taxpayer that, under Proposition 2.5, sure, our income is increasing at 3.2% a year, but this year your taxes are going up at 4.1% because of X, Y, Z, and one of those things is increase in costs in the town administrator's office. We have the opportunity here to be a little bit more efficient than we were before, and to do it by identifying what our real needs are and pursuing fulfilling those needs rather than saying, okay, well, this is how we did it before. And it seems to me that the direction that we're moving in is one of shared responsibility throughout the municipal center, bringing department heads in more and, giving them agency over their capital projects, relying on CIPC a little bit more, giving the new town administrator a little bit more agency over the budget and ownership over that, and allowing the department heads, along with the new communication management director and the new finance director, to really carve out those roles. So I think I like the vision as presented, and I'm in full support.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Mr. Terenzini.
Let me just say that we could, I think, maintain the vision of the several members and Ms. DeFazio if we call this assistant to the town administrator. That's less than an assistant town administrator, and that is, in fact, the title that's used in Shrewsbury. Gives it a little more cachet without necessarily needing to move it up in a grade level at this point. I put that out there as a possible harmonizing of everyone's thoughts.
Mr. Fazio?
Thank you. Carter, what I'm hearing from my fellow board members is that they are in support of the title as well, and that it's really, reflecting exactly, the efficiency that this board is looking for. So in my opinion, trying to, kind of muffle the two together, and someone else can disagree with me, but I'm okay with having, this discussion and maybe not being in support of the title. That's why we're a 5-member board. And, these were my concerns, and I'm not opposed at all to the position that you've presented. I just had some, items for discussion, because those were my personal concerns about, are we going to be able to hire this person, and what happens in the future? And so, but what I'm hearing the argument is budget. Number one, the concern over the budget, and number two, the efficiency of the role, and having the role be exactly what the goals of the community are, which are communications and a management analyst. So I'm okay to disagree. So we don't really need to put it together if the rest of the board doesn't not want to do that.
Ms. Roy?
I just have a question. With the last suggestion, the assistant to the town administrator, do we already have that role? Isn't that role already exist in Grafton?
Not in this fashion. I know that some folks think of an executive assistant,
Okay.
executive secretary, or an administrative assistant. But that is more of a clerical and administrative function across the board in this profession. An assistant to the town administrator is generally thought more of as the professional side of the profession.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, so the general takeaway tonight, Carter, are you proposing do not take action on this tonight and come back at a future meeting?
If the board, the only thing that I had heard was a discussion on there seemed to be support for the job description as I've laid it out, for the title as capturing in particular the communications piece. And as I say, we'll hopefully get someone who wanted to not only go to business college, but be that chatterbox like my stepdaughter was. We'll hope we'll find that good marriage. If the board's prepared to go forward this evening, I would respectfully request that it move forward to change the title of the position, Assistant Town Administrator, to that of Management Analyst and Communications Specialist, and classify it at grade level 4.
So there's an action that we could take tonight from the board's perspective. If there isn't any further discussion on this, what is the board's wish at this point? Mr. Fazio?
I think we should move forward. We need to fill these positions. And like I said, I am disagreement on the title because I tend to lean toward a more generalist position, but I also hear what my board members want, and am in agreement also of the job description, if that makes sense, if I can be two people at once. I like this job. I wish we also had an ATA, but we can't. And so, but I think the most important thing is that we move forward and vote to get moving on this.
Okay. All right. All right, at this point, I can entertain a motion.
I move the board vote to accept the amended classification plan, eliminating the position of Assistant Town Administrator by changing it to a Management Analyst and Communications Specialist.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the
Mr.
motion?
Chairman, the motion would need to specify the grade level that you're going to set that at, or all we've done is change the job title and left it at a grade level 6.
I would like to amend, it's 4, right? You want it to a 4?
That is the suggestion of both myself and the HR specialist who did your original classification plan.
Okay. I would like to amend my motion to, I move the board vote to accept the amended classification plan, eliminating the position of Assistant Town Administrator by changing it to a Management Analyst or Communications Specialist, grade level 4.
I will accept the amended motion if whoever seconded the original one would second that.
Second.
Thank you. Amended motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none. All those by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio?
Mr. Fazio, nay.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, aye.
Mr. Frisbee?
Aye.
Mr. Often?
Often aye.
Carlson, aye. I declare the motion carried 4-0. Okay, thank you. All right, thank you, Mr. Terenzini, for putting that together. Next up on our agenda here, we have let me see here, what do I got? I have select board member reports or correspondence. Hold on, what do I got here? 1 second. So select board member reports here. So just an update that I have for the board. A couple things. Local tax relief committee. We've sent that information out. Mr. Terenzini contacted me about, and this is that initiative that Mr. Prisby brought to the board a couple of months ago, working with our assessor. Mr. Terenzini, do you want to give a little bit more of an update? I know we talked about it earlier, but I think you might have some insight into the action from Ms. Oliver.
Sure. I met with Ms. Oliver and Ms. Perkins. Ms. Oliver's reaching out to the Assessors Association to get a handle on how many communities she can find out does this statewide, and also to get their rules and regulations so we could have a good running start. We're meeting again on Thursday morning to review the materials that she's been able to collect. And my hope is to have a full report and for you at your November 10th workshop, along with land use and some other documents so we can move from what's been on your plate and get right into some of the work that comes out of the workshop. So we'll have something in the weekly for you on Thursday on this.
Great, thank you. And the other thing, there's any questions on that? The next thing I have coming up, so we have a tentative date set for a TRICOM committee meeting next week on November 5th with the school committee and finance committee. If you guys have any agenda items that may require some additional time to be prepared, I would ask that you get them into me by noontime on Thursday to give ample amount of time for any report that needs to be generated from any department head based on what your proposed agenda item that you want to discuss between the three boards. I would ask that if you do come up with an agenda item, that it pertains to the discussion items between the finance committee and the school committee. And that's all I have. TA report. Does anyone other member have a select board member report? Mr. Terenzini.
I just had a question on the TRICOM. I'd filled out the survey, but I hadn't seen a final date yet. And I'm pretty much done with revenue projections. Was going to present them to you on November 10 at your workshop. But should I be trying to accelerate that in some fashion so that you can review them with FinCom and schools? So I just want to make sure my work's, I'm getting it to you in a manner you can integrate it with the other boards.
Personally, I feel that that would be fantastic if you could have that ready for a week from Thursday. I think between finance committee and school committee, the three boards would probably find the most use of that information, especially for its planning for FY22 and beyond. I don't know if the rest of the board would agree that we could still have the discussion at our next workshop, but if you're all in agreement, I think if that information is available on Thursday, November 5th, it should be talked about then and presented.
Yeah, I can have that to present as long as everyone understands it's being distributed for review and comment. And at the end of the day, it's the select board that settles on the revenue projections that guide the work that we do on preparing the expense budget.
Okay. Any questions on that? All right, if we could work on that, Carter, that would be great.
Yep.
All right. Any other select board have a member report? I'm sorry, Mr. Prisby.
Yeah, just quickly, on the GSC, we are, I'm working with Barry for a presentation of the benchmarking reports, and I was talking to Carter about getting some information that we require on the municipal cost structure stuff. So that's going to be moving forward a little more, again, to the extent that we can. this month. Obviously, it's difficult to meet with department heads and wrangle information the way we would have liked to, but we're going to try and forge forward the best way we know how.
Okay, thank you. Any other member reports? Ms. Roy?
CPC is meeting tomorrow night with school committee, and they had an energy audit recently completed by a company named Train, who will also be coming in and presenting their energy audit for anybody who would like to check that out.
Ms. Roy, you said CIPC for that one?
I did. I
Okay.
might have said, it's getting late. I might have said CPC. It's definitely CIPC though.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Any other have a member report? All right, thank you. Carter, any additional T? I think we talked about the town accountant position, so I think we can pass over that tonight. Fire chief transition plan chart, I would probably think, we're going to town meeting on Saturday. I think that will dictate what our next steps are going forward.
For the general public, I did send out to the board yesterday a quick update. I know there was some concerns about the drop box for ballots. The cameras at the police department have been turned in a fashion that they are now able to monitor the drop box 24/7. So I hope that provides a level of reassurance to folks and a level of deterrence to some others. After we get past the election, I will talk with Mr. Berger. I think that we have the schools monitored 24/7 at dispatch, and I think we can probably get the same done for the municipal center, because we do want the camera at the police department that we've turned back on to the police department right after the election is done. If there are questions on the report weekly, that press release is done, and this Friday's will start to go to the public at large. Other than that, I do my best to keep you up to date as breaking news happens. I'm not as fast as Wolf Blitzer, but we do our best.
Thank you. Any questions? All right, next up, we have a couple of correspondences, Ms. Roy.
So the way we're doing correspondence now, it's in the meeting packet, and if any member chooses to discuss any of them, I thought was how we were handling it.
That's correct.
Okay.
All right. If anyone doesn't have any questions on that, we can move on to
Actually, I got something.
Mr. Prisby.
I'm sorry. There was something brought up about noise from a neighbor at Reunion. And obviously we encourage people to write to us with their concerns. And in the age of COVID, with more restaurants having seating outside, the relationship between the business and the adjoining neighborhoods is going to be strained a little bit. And I think that's safe to say. We always have to balance these competing interests between what is going to keep people employed during COVID, what is going to keep people healthy, and what is going to be good just on a neighborly basis where noise is concerned. Grafton, to the best of my knowledge, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, does not have a noise ordinance. So we're sort of relying on people to just generally be respectful. And while I appreciate the concern of the person who wrote in, we also are not, there's very little that we can do. I think a lot of people see this board sometimes as a little bit omnipotent. And I can tell you that sometimes I feel like nothing could be further from the truth. We don't have the authority to enforce noise, or, even we don't even have a noise ordinance to enforce. If we did, that would be the police. So if there is a conversation that we need to have, generally speaking, with, I don't know, maybe EDC could reach out, I don't know. But if there's a larger conversation that we need to have about noise, I think probably the direction to go would be to consider a noise ordinance. I can tell you, in my private practice, I represent businesses who field noise complaints from the public, and they have to get called before their board of selectmen or board of aldermen or wherever. And it's sort of always the same thing where you could have a noise ordinance, but then you're getting into, okay, well, what decibel level is okay? you get some guy out there with his decibel level machine measuring. So I guess to the extent possible, I just want to say, I appreciate the concern of the neighbors, and I would hope that they would appreciate the fact that this is a new era that we're living in. We have to try certain new things. It's getting to be wintertime. I think that problem could potentially take care of itself. And also to the business owners who are experimenting with ways in keeping their businesses open by, doing the healthy and responsible thing by keeping things outdoors. Do be aware that it's not licensed to throw a concert in your parking lot. And if we keep fielding these complaints, as much as it is outside the scope of our authority to do these things, we might have to start thinking about how it could be inside the scope of our authority to do these things and enforce these things. And I would rather not do that. I would rather that people worked it out. So I guess that's my extreme fence straddling message to the person that wrote the letter. But I do want to acknowledge that, we're all in a weird situation, and I'm really sorry that you're inconvenienced. And I would hope that we would be able to work something out. If we can't, please come before the board. We'd be happy to accept you in public comment and maybe have a conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Frisbee. All right, any other questions on correspondence? I'm not seeing anything. Okay, moving on to, just get there. Hold on a second. We don't have any discussion tonight. Go on meeting minutes for October 6, 2020.
I move the board vote to approve the October 6, 2020 meeting minutes as presented.
Second.
Motion made at second. Any discussion on the motion for approval of meeting minutes? Hearing none. All those by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio?
Fazio, aye.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, I.
Mr. Frisbee?
Yeah.
Mr. Alston?
Often I.
Carlson, I declare the motion carried. Next up, we have October meeting minutes for October 13th.
I move the board vote to approve the October 13, 2020 meeting minutes as presented.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion for approval of minutes? Seeing none. All those by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio?
Fazio, aye.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, I.
Frisbee?
Yeah.
Mr. Alston?
Often I.
Peter Carlson, I declare the motion carried. Okay, last but not least, just some ongoing tasks for internal review and informational purposes. Election audit. I don't think we have any updates on that, Mr. Terenzini, do we, at this time?
I'm afraid we do not, beyond what we've provided to you. We did provide all of the materials that were asked for in the briefing with Mr. Cook. But I do not have a report for you as of yet, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you. Any library building updates for us, Doreen?
The subcommittee was meeting tonight. I think the regular meeting is scheduled for next Monday or the Monday after. I have to check the schedule on that, but I will have an update after that.
Okay, thank you. Creation of a charge for a town-owned land database. I believe that's still in my court here too, Mr. Terenzini.
We intend to have that for you at your workshop of November 10th, fully constructed as to its purpose. My understanding it's to A, catalog properties, and then B, identify those which absolutely want to be kept for municipal purposes, those which perhaps want to be held at this point for whether there's land assembly with others or potentially sold, and to be an ongoing purpose of this committee. If I've not construed that correctly, if folks could just send me an email so I can get this charge done to reflect wherever I went off the rails, I would appreciate that.
Connor, I want to just emphasize, we probably want to have Dave Robbins attend that workshop.
Absolutely.
That discussion, right?
Yep,
And
absolutely.
with his consultation and review as well, since he brought this to our attention.
Yep.
All right. And then Upton Street RFP.
The RFP was extended. I can't remember the date. We'll have that in the report for you. There were several interested parties that wanted some more time. I believe it was extended to mid-January, I believe January 15th. They wanted a little more time, but I shortened it up because if they do get proposals that are worthy of your consideration, I need it to back into the timeline for the annual town meeting for any disposal or other actions required by the town meeting.
Okay. All right. Any questions on that? Okay. That's all we have to, oh, Ms. Roy, sorry.
So not that specifically, but I have a couple ongoing issues I'd like to add to the list. One being the trash contracts, it sounds like now. I'd like to keep that on there and at the forefront of our discussion so we're always knowing what that is, especially if we are thinking about doing a public hearing, just to get input on that. And then the cannabis policy, where we are with that, do we have one? Does it need updating? You know, are we giving out any more host community agreements if people did come see us? If that would be possible, I would like information on those.
Okay. All right. Anything else, Mr. Often?
Yeah, just on the cannabis policy, can we just add that as a discussion in one of our upcoming meetings? I think that's an important one.
I can do that. Okay. Anything else? Okay. Not seeing anything. I can entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
I second it.
Second, all those in favor by roll call. Mr. Fazio,
DeFazio, aye.
Ms. Roy,
Roy, aye.
Mr. Frisbee,
Okay.
Mr. Often,
Often I.
Peter Carlson, aye. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great evening. We'll see you Thursday. Thank you.
Thank you.